Hello everyone and welcome back to another video on the channel, and today we're going to be talking about The Monkey. This movie is directed by Osgood Perkins, starring Theo James, Tatiana Maslany, Convery, Colin O'Brien, and of course, Theo James. Now, I have a very unique experience with this movie, one that I have actually seen a few times now. The first watch was actually for a test screening back in August of last year before any trailer was released for this movie. So picture going into this movie when all you know is that it's the director's follow-up to Longlegs, which is a film that I absolutely loved. And the movie begins with a woman's face being lit on fire, to which she freaks out and runs outside, only to ram her face into a for sale sign due to the Final Destination-esque powers of a killer monkey. Yeah, it was quite the shock for me and the entire audience that I was with. And so ever since August, I've been dying to talk about this film, both the events that transpire within the story and also my experience with a test screening. So of course, I'll be talking about spoilers for this movie. And so if you have not had a chance to go watch it and you're in for a bloody good horror comedy, I would highly recommend this film to go check it out in theaters, then to come back to get to my thoughts on the film and of course, my thoughts on the test screening experience. So what is The Monkey about? Well, essentially it follows twins played by Convery as kids and later on by Theo James as adults, and they stumble upon this toy monkey in their father's closet, and when the key on its back is turned, someone dies. And like it says on the box, it's just like life. There's no rhyme or reason. It doesn't take requests. It simply kills whoever it wants, whatever it wants, just like life. But unlike real life, the kills on this are absolutely bonkers. Yes, we do have a story about death and about these estranged brothers dealing with their childhood trauma, but at its core, this movie lives and dies on its kill sequences. And that's what I really loved about this movie. It knows exactly what it is, and it doesn't try to be anything beyond just that. Stephen King adaptations are really fun to watch for me because they just show how much range his stories really do have. You can have a really tense and unsettling film like The Shining, or something deeply dramatic like The Shawshank Redemption, or a story about a killer clown terrorizing children, and now even a story about a wind-up killer monkey. And you know, not every King adaptation has worked. Frankly, I think more have probably failed than not, but almost every project of his feels unique in the ways that count. And the same thing can be said about Osgood Perkins as a director. This movie is the complete antithesis to Longlegs. There is not a single strand of DNA between these two films that is shared. This movie had me dying laughing, especially during the test screening, because I was entirely taken aback by the vastly different tone this had compared to every other film that he's directed. And I think it's important for a filmmaker to make films like this, especially after something like Longlegs that was hyped as one of the scariest films in recent years, you know, maybe even to a fault, but either way, it was marketed as just that. This movie doesn't care about those expectations. From the opening scene of a pawn shop owner's intestines being ripped out by a harpoon, you know exactly what kind of movie you're walking into.
No, 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 no!
The coroner said it was an accident, but it was no accident. It was a monkey.
After the tone is set in this opening scene, you run through Hal and Bill's childhood in discovering this killer monkey and learning the hard lessons behind the rules of this world. You turn the key and someone dies. It's as simple as that, and there's a sense of responsibility to whoever was the one who turned that key. The first death was for Babysitter Annie, whose name I only honestly really know because they referenced her as Babysitter Annie every single time, which I found to be hilarious. And upon thinking the monkey had something to do with this death, Hal turns the key once again in the hopes that his brother will die from it. And yes, Bill was always an asshole to Hal, even in their childhood, but this was the true inciting incident to this story, and the consequences and resulting guilt from their mother being killed in this moment is what drives both of these characters for the rest of the film. When it comes to Hal, he feels immense guilt for his mother's death to the point where he avoids making deeper relationships with anyone he's around, including his own son, because he feels that bad things are going to happen to those that he loves most. And for Bill, well, he holds on to this resentment towards his brother because he too blames Hal for the death of their mother. And this brotherly rivalry within this movie honestly was probably the one thing in this movie that worked better for me on each consecutive viewing that I had. But I definitely can relate to anybody who walks out of this movie being underwhelmed by the characters in this. Bill is a very unlikable character, and I think that some of the over-the-top things that he does throughout the story does fall a bit flat, particularly the double fake outs with his handshake at the very end of the movie. It definitely deflated the moments of reconciliation between the brothers at the little climax of this story, which was a bit unfortunate. And even Hal can be frustrating as his disconnect from his son is sorely felt throughout the entirety of the film. But this is all on purpose. It is by design. Bill never really grew up. He never really left his childhood, since his maturity essentially died alongside his mother. And I guess it is possible that he would have ended up like this anyway, but the fact that he wears his childhood funeral suit stitched together with the Guy Fieri button-up is a direct result in the lack in emotional growth throughout his life. And of course, you know, with Hal, he avoids connecting with his son out of fear that the monkey will come back to kill his entire family, to kill all his loved ones. So the fact that their dynamic feels awkward and stilted till the very end of the film is definitely on purpose. So I don't necessarily love these characters, but I do think that their story and arcs are well done. But most importantly, Theo James is phenomenal in these dual roles. And again, he's so over the top with the Bill performance, but it's so funny to me, especially as it contrasts with his more subdued performance for Hal, who is constantly in a state of holding in an outburst underneath his skin. I loved his performance here.
The monkey that likes killing our family. It's back. It must be vanquished.
And I also love Tatiana Maslany in the brief amount of screen time that she had within this movie. I loved her speech after Babysitter Annie's death about how everyone dies. The coldness of that speech followed by them going out dancing is honestly the heart of the entire film. And the flash of her saying goodbye to Bill at the very end of the film, which was actually added in the final version of the movie, brought all the heart to the very end of this film, which I really did appreciate, especially since that was one of the notes that I left after the test screening.
And some of us, horribly, violently, tied up with clothesline and screaming through duct tape over our mouths and all that jazz.
And then you have the rest of the characters that inhabit this world, which felt ripped straight out of the oddest of Stephen King novels. All these side characters are so strange with little quirks that help make them all stand out on their own. The real estate agent in particular was by far my favorite of these characters, with her forced smile being something truly out of my nightmares. Hal's boss from work was an absolute cartoon. Elijah Wood is in one scene as a completely throwaway character, but an oddly funny character. And the entire family surrounding the Eddie from Stranger Things stand-in was extremely specific. And the deaths that befalls these characters are equally as quirky. Babysitter Annie's decapitation is so unrealistic, but hey, why not? It led to several laughs as the rookie priest kept, stumbling upon inappropriate innuendos as it pertained to her death inside of the church. That was hysterical.
Oh, fuck.
The montage of deaths you see when the real estate agent is talking about these strange events that has been occurring inside of the small town is filled with a bunch of memorable moments. I don't honestly know if the lawnmower was an homage to The Happening, but even if it wasn't, of course my Shyamalan-loving brain would make that connection. And you can't forget the Viper attack on that golf course from the one Viper in all of Maine. When the monkey goes mad at the end of the film, you get another string of insane deaths. The bees killing Eddie's stand-in was absolutely gruesome. You gotta love the callback to the skydiving couple getting married, with them coming down through the roof at the end of the movie. I also have no clue how a surfboard impaled a man in the middle of a rural area in Maine, but hey, I guess there was also that one Viper, so why not? And of course you get the odd cheerleading squad who was for some reason cheering on the aunt's death, who also got their end as they all got hereditaried in the final shot of the film. So yeah, maybe all these outlandish kills and the darkly comedic tone won't be enough for you as an audience member. Maybe you need a bit more substance beyond the silly nature of the gore in this movie, but I found the tone, Theo James' dual performance, and the Final Destination-esque kills to be more than enough for me to enjoy this movie. So those are going to be my thoughts on The Monkey as a film, but before I go, I do want to talk about my experience going to the test screening for this movie. I hope I can fully talk about this now that the movie is out, and if not, then oops, please still invite me to more. But I really did love this opportunity because I did recently move to Los Angeles, and being from Colorado, the idea of test screenings was always fascinating to me. For this test screening, my phone was actually not confiscated before the screening, which honestly found to be kind of surprising, although we did end up using them for the survey at the end of the film, so I guess that makes sense. But I have been to a couple more test screenings since then, which I cannot disclose, where my phone was actually taken away, so I do believe that that is a standard. But for this one, we actually didn't get them taken away. We got a little introduction from the company that was hosting the screenings, and like I said, the entire audience had no clue what we were walking into. The only thing we knew was that it was called The Monkey, that it was from Osgood Perkins, and by the time the opening scene ended, the audience was so on board with the tone of this film. I did end up going to an early access screening for this last week, and I think the crowd for that movie didn't honestly really vibe with the surprising tone as much as that test screening did, but I think at this point, based on the marketing, I think most people know that this movie is a horror comedy, and so I guess just the surprise of it, being a horror comedy after expecting something like Longlegs was definitely what made the test audience really love the tone of this movie. When it comes to differences between the unfinished version that I watched back in August versus the one that I watched last week, the biggest of them was definitely the opening scene. Adam Scott was not in the opening at all. It actually opened with the death of the aunt instead of this whole Adam Scott thing. I'm not sure if it was ever in the script originally or if it was added after the fact, but I do think that Osgood Perkins knew that he had to start the movie with a very over-the-top and ridiculous death at the very beginning of the film to kick off the tone of this movie, which I think he succeeded in both versions of the opening scene. The entire montage scene while the real estate agent was talking was definitely added in post, along with the death of, Hal's boss. That scene was also added since the first time I watched the movie. If anything, there could have been, placeholder text during the actual screening itself, which, the version I had a lot of temp VFX and temp score. And so when those moments came up, they did warn us to essentially use our imaginations for how it would look. And, when it was finished, especially when it comes to the bees scene, it looked a lot better than what it did, several months ago. And I think the final product of it did actually work pretty well. And again, that flashback at the very end of the movie with Bill getting to see his mom say goodbye to him was also added, which I absolutely loved. By far, the biggest note that I gave in the test screening survey was that the emotion of the brothers' reconciliation just wasn't quite there, and adding a little moment with the mom would have definitely driven that home for me, and they added it, and I'm so glad that they did. And so after the screening was over, we all took out our phones, we took the survey, and then we went home, and that was it. Honestly, fascinating to be a part of the filmmaking process that you always hear about but rarely get to actually participate in. And I'm so glad that The Monkey of all movies was the first film that I got to see in this fashion. But there we have it. Those are my thoughts on the film and my experience with the test screening. And as always, I'm very curious to hear what you think in the comment section down below of both this movie and also my experience watching it in the test screening. And as always, if you enjoyed this review, make sure you guys leave a like and subscribe to the channel to see more reviews just like this. I just reviewed Heart Eyes a couple weeks ago along with Captain America Brave New World, which I thought was actually pretty decent. So thanks everyone for watching, and I hope to see you all in my next one. Oh my god, I forgot to mention the horse in this movie. The first time that I watched it for the test screening, once I got to the survey, they asked if I understood the meaning of the horse at the end of the film, and I couldn't for the life of me remember what that all meant. And the second time I watched it, I forgot that I was going to try to figure out what the horse meant, and I missed it again. And now the third time I watched it, I finally realized it. That's, they mentioned earlier on in the movie that there is a pale horse. Upon a pale horse is going to be death sitting upon it, and that is essentially what that pale horse and the man sitting on top of it means. He essentially is seeing death cross his path, and Hal has now essentially accepted that death is a part of life, and he's now, reconciled with that fact, and he can now move on with his life and live happily ever after. That is what that meant. Thanks for watching.